Welcome, everyone. I'm Claudia Schippert, and this is the Presidential Plenary, Imagining Freedom and Dignity with Rescued Elephants, Conversations at Wildlife SOS in Mathur, India. This session is sponsored by our diamond sponsor, Wabash Center for Teaching and Learning in Theology and Religion, and we thank them very much. I am now happy to turn over the floor to President Leela Prasad, who will say a few words and explain how this plenary is going to proceed. Leela?
Thank you, Claudia. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Claudia. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the first plenary around this year's presidential theme, which, is freedom. Thank you all for coming to this plenary, which, is very dear to my heart. I've been talking about this in every session that I've attended over the last 2 days, and this is it. This is where we are. And so thank you so much for coming. The people who you will be engaging along with me are very special in all sorts of ways to me. Just to give you a quick context of how this came about and what you're going to be saying, a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with Geeta and Karthik, who I will introduce shortly. And we made a film based on this conversation. So what we're going to do is let's start watching this 30-minute film. And there are introductions in the film itself. And after the film ends, we'll open it up for Q&A. And before I do that, I do want to introduce the others who are very critical in the making of this film. I'm going to turn it over to Claudia to play the film straight away. Let's jump into it. Thank you. Welcome to the American Academy of Religion's June sessions, which are the online part of our two-part annual meeting. I'm Leela Prasad, Professor of Religious Studies at Brown University and President of the American Academy of Religion. It is my great pleasure to welcome Karthik Satyanarayan and Geeta Seshamuni, co-founders of Wildlife SOS, the largest wildlife rescue organization in India. Wildlife SOS is about 90 kilometers from Delhi, and they have 12 rescue and rehabilitation centers across India. Wildlife SOS's mission is to protect and conserve India's natural heritage, its forests and biodiversity. They've been accomplishing this mission by tackling the root of the problem, which is often the human factor. Among the things they've become a model for is the creation of alternative and sustainable livelihoods for communities that depended on poaching wildlife for sustenance. The Kalandar community, which used to capture and mutilate sloth bears in order to make them dance on public streets in cities across the length and breadth of India. And this was the only means of livelihood for them. Geeta and Karthik studied the problem and discovered its roots lay in abject poverty and human rights deprivations. They gradually won the trust of the community and created attractive economic alternatives so that the community did not need to exploit bears. And over a period of 7 years, which is a record time, they rescued more than 600 bears and brought a horrific tradition of 400 years to an end. So now I'm going to introduce the two of you. Let me introduce Karthik and Geeta a little more formally. Karthik is Wildlife SOS's CEO. He oversees 10 rescue and rehabilitation facilities for various animals ranging from leopards to reptiles. As head of Forest Watch, the anti-poaching unit of Wildlife SOS, he often goes undercover to expose poaching gangs, and several tiger and elephant poachers have been caught and brought to trial as a result of this work. Geeta Seshamani is the co-founder and secretary of Wildlife SOS. She is one of India's foremost wildlife conservationists and animal rights activists. Geeta's life unfolded over 3 decades from her conviction that human beings can coexist with non-human animals and with forests. Now, after witnessing a sloth bear being forced to perform in Uttar Pradesh, she launched with Karthik a 30-month-long investigation to understand the problem. Wildlife was born in that effort. So thank you so much, Karthik and Geeta. It's just so lovely to see you in that frame here. Thank you once again for being here. What might freedom mean for elephants who have been denied it for decades, paraded through cities, used in processions, forced into labor, subjected to all sorts of violence? Can one be free? Can one be free amidst a species that profited from your abuse and bondage and neglect?
Absolutely, Leela. It's an honor and a pleasure for us to be here, to speak with you and to discuss this very, very important topic. And for us, I think freedom and dignity are very important parameters for every animal that we rescue, and what we restore in terms of, semblance of their life that was shattered at one point of time.
The answer can only be an emotional one, a visceral feeling that you have when you're in front of an animal and you can see the animal. And I can't say we talk always, but you do communicate. When you spend a lot of your time with animals, then you are able to communicate at another level with them. And almost all our rescued elephants don't articulate much when we get them. But it's later when they form groups that the trumpeting begins, the squeaks begin. Especially at night, you can hear the gentle rumbles that take place and go through the ground. And to understand that this new life is not just freedom, but also choices. It can choose to go into the pond, it can choose to eat, it can choose to lie down, it can choose to have a mud bath. I think that's one thing humans and animals have in common, that we connect freedom to having choices.
To add to what Geeta said, I think it's very important for us to also understand that these animals, every single elephant that we see in captivity today, every single one of them has been taken from the wild. And those animals can never go back. They can never be put back. So they have been torn from their herds, their families. It's akin to a child being kidnapped and then thrown into a slave camp and then being slave driven all through its life. They lose their family, they go through unspeakable trauma, they're brutalized, they're abused, and in 1 second they've gone from being a free animal in the forest, in their own habitat, doing their own thing, having nothing to do with humans, but for no fault of theirs, suddenly they are in captivity, they're in a kraal, they're being beaten, chained, starved, just so they can become a tool, a vehicle, a mechanism for generating revenue for another species that is, certifiably the most abusive, the most destructive species on this planet. These poor animals have now lost their ability to survive on their own. They've lost the opportunity to bond with their herd. They cannot go back in the wild. I mean, there are some rewilding opportunities, but for that we need a large volume of space. Unfortunately, India being the most populated country in the world, I mean, you can throw a stone on the map of India and you will find human habitation 10 meters from that place that you throw on. So unfortunately, inviolate spaces are very hard to find. But what we can give is restore that choice, restore that freedom of choice for these animals. The fact that we can take away the lack of these 5 freedoms that they had. They had all of those problems till the time Wildlife SOS rescued these animals. And we've been able to restore that. It takes time. We've got to build the trust with that animal, because every elephant that we rescue comes to us wincing with fear, absolutely horrified of what is going to happen to it, expecting pain, expecting abuse and brutality every step. But that is where the role of Wildlife SOS comes in, where we have a team of compassionate caregivers, veterinary doctors, a scientific backing of how to address the behavior that we see. The 5 freedoms were for animal welfare were developed in 1965, and it basically talks about freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury and disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress.
Could you locate this in a couple of stories of particular elephants? I know you rescued Vayu recently, but there are so many other elephants there. And what does that journey look like from being only knowing brutality and bondage to feeling your way into the first steps of, what has that journey been like for particular elephants? Are there a couple of stories that maybe you could share that you...
I can't really tell you the entire story of one elephant, but whatever I remember, like one of my earliest elephants was Rajesh. He's a tusker. He's still my favorite. And he was rescued while being taken across state borders. He was a circus elephant. So obviously he sold maybe for performance to another circus. And he was intercepted. He was being illegally carried. The proper papers were not there. And we got him at our sanctuary. And I remember he's a magnificently huge tusker. He was a gentle animal, but very traumatized. So traumatized that he would wrap his trunk around his head and actually suck on his trunk. He's the only elephant we rescued that I saw was so upset. And I think that was the elephant that I studied the most closely and felt that the psychological wounds, the emotional wounds an elephant goes through before it finally realizes that it's in an environment where it doesn't have to suffer pain anymore. For them, that is the biggest realization, that the hand that is now reaching out for them is not to inflict pain. It is only to give consolation, love, treats, all the things that make life pleasant and not anything to be feared of.
How long did it take for him to understand that the same species is capable of doing something different?
I would say a good 6 months. And also I think a large part of the relaxation was to figure out what did he enjoy the most. Some elephants just enjoy lying down and finally being able to sleep lying down, which is something, it's horrifying to learn that such a simple need. They are usually tied continuously 24/7 for decades and decades on cemented or stone flooring. They just never get to lie down to sleep. So I think Rajesh really enjoyed his mud beds. And the other thing he really enjoyed was his pond. They have a very cute video of him at night. He had managed to get a cold by spending the whole winter night in the pond. And so the vet decided that Rajesh was going to be banned from his pond for about a week. And he just couldn't bear that. So we have this footage, CCTV footage at night, where he learns to climb his gate and he gets right onto the top and then realizes he's just too heavy, he's going to tumble if he goes down the other side. And you can see the regret on his face as he comes back down, and he goes and stands in his sheds and starts munching on his night treats. The happiness is in a lot of simple things. For example, some of the older elephants, their happiness is just in standing very close to each other. And so one of the other very touching sights is when they make their own bonds and their friendships, and we can put them together. They just like to keep their head leaning on the other shoulder. Very often their trunk is on each other's back. Very often they are forehead to forehead. And then you realize this is just their way of communicating or being able to show love. and bonding, and that this is such a huge deprivation for them. Most captive elephants, when in captivity, are not allowed to do these kind of things.
What you're saying is very evocative of this fundamental link between freedom and articulation. Something that you began with, that to articulate, and we're all facing this in different ways, but to make that necessary leap to understanding, well, this applies to every species, between being yourself, being able to say, and is very tied to freedom. And so I'm very moved by that. Yeah.
And yes, if we are lucky, then animals are like Rajesh, and in 6 months to a year they can start trusting us. But some of them take much longer. Like Suraj, for instance, he was the gentlest soul, but the way he was abused was just hard to believe. He'd lost his ear, and he had never seen sunlight. He had never walked on grass before. He had been locked up in a shed, like a garage, for I think 42 years before we were able to kind of get him away. And so these are the examples. Yes, and freedom is a really important thing, and dignity as well.
Quickly, before we move to dignity also, on the question of Rajesh, given that it was the same Mahout who had inflicted pain, how did he trust him again? How did he lend himself to a reawakened relationship?
I think, Leela, this is where animals score higher marks than human beings. Okay, although we speak of elephants having long memories, and we speak of it, but I have found in elephants as well as in many other species, the ability to forgive and the ability to accept the change is much more than humans have for each other. So with consistent kindness, you see, in the beginning, our entire endeavor is always to make the animal survive, how to make him healthier, and all the parameters are physical as we try to make him regain his physical health. After that comes the bigger question of how to make him a happy animal, how to give him activity, how to make him feel that this is now his world, he's in control of it, and he can really learn to live his life as full as he can within the constraints that there are there always. So at that time we find that the relationship does begin to change, because the same person who's been his Mahout for so long is no longer coming anywhere near him with the tools of torture. The same Mahout is only serving him food. The same Mahout is only treating him with rewards. It's positive reinforcement throughout.
When I spoke to Karthik early on before this conversation a few months ago, and I said, the AR's theme this year is freedom, and Karthik said freedom and dignity. And that stayed with me, because I understood the question of freedom, the transition from circumstances of bondage to freedom. But the dignity part was a little more elusive. Can you unpack that a little bit? Why do they always go together in terms of elephant life or animal life?
So, for an elephant, dignity, I would think, would translate to being treated with respect. Making sure their well-being is taken care of, being free from harm and exploitation. Maybe it's kind of enmeshed with freedom a little bit, but also you have this animal that is like the king of the forest, right? It has an immense presence, intimidated. Everybody else around it is intimidated by the presence of an elephant. It's the largest land mammal on this planet, right? And then you have the same animals that are, just every shred of respect, freedom, and their being is taken away, torn apart, and they're deprived of everything when they're chained, hobbled, used for begging, used for entertainment, used as tourist props and for safaris and things like that. Also, the fact that they are not provided any shelter, no complete lack of veterinary care, complete neglect, no opportunities for social interaction, like Geeta mentioned, sleeping, getting in water, having a bath, and getting a dust bath. These are just natural behaviors which don't take much effort. But taking that away, I think, is taking away their dignity as well. The fact that conflict is increasing in all forest areas. Some parts of Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh never had wild elephants, ever, for the last 10 decades. A few years ago, Wildlife SOS was called by the Chhattisgarh Forest Department to analyze and discuss and find a solution to the fact that 90 human fatalities had occurred in a very small period of time due to one herd of elephants. So when we investigated, we found out this was a herd of elephants in the state of Orissa in eastern India. Because that coal mine was situated right in the middle of their elephant corridor, the elephants had no choice but to divert their whole trajectory of their journey, and they entered the state of Chhattisgarh, which is in central India, instead of being in eastern India. The people in Chhattisgarh had never seen wild elephants before. So they were amazed, intrigued, but also curious. So people would go close to these elephants and try to take selfies and get close to them. They didn't understand avoidance behavior. So we had a huge amount of human fatalities. So what Wildlife SOS had to do was get in there, work with the community, do awareness programs at the ground level, teach them avoidance behavior. At the same time, we found out where this herd was operating. We got our team to get on the ground, track them for weeks and weeks and weeks on foot, which is bloody dangerous, and then put a GPS collar on the matriarch so we could track them in real time. And then we were able to predict what their movement was and every 2 hours where they were moving. And then we created groups with WhatsApp communities inside each village. And then we would circulate this location saying the elephant herd is traveling in this trajectory. In 3 kilometers, they will hit this village. In 4.5 kilometers, they're going to X village and then Y village. So all the people from these communities would come there with their pots and pans and make a lot of noise and drive the elephant herd away from their village, which would prevent conflict. These elephants were only trying to go about their business. They just wanted food, they wanted water, they didn't want anybody's property, they didn't want anybody's, anybody's assets or money or anything. All they wanted was the freedom of the choice of movement and to be able to access their own natural food sources.
Can you tell a couple of stories of elephants at Mathura, at the center that express a certain gay abandon, who have now, are feeling and living a free life in a way that's really visible to you?
I would say maybe Chanchal, for example. Gay abandon is probably her second name or her middle name, and everybody here, only cares for her, loves her, pampers her. She gets what she wants, and she then started tantruming. Like there was no tomorrow, and with complete gay abandon. She was so full of life, and she very soon started even pulling food out of Bijli's mouth, and we call her Sai Geeta, as well as from Lakshmi's mouth, and they became a very strong bonded team, this trio.
Is there any elephant right now that is having a harder time fitting on its new shoes of freedom, just being?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, we've got a very complicated case in Bani.
Bani is a young elephant. We rescued her when she was about 9 months old, and the news came to us more as a shock because she was with her mother. The train that was going through the forest area, unfortunately, I think she and her mother got trapped on that. So her mother got the brunt of the injury. She was killed instantly on the spot. But because she shielded the baby, I think Bani got thrown off the tracks and fell on the ground. And this remains a mystery to this day, but she was completely paralyzed. Bani was completely paralyzed. So we don't know what exactly was the problem, but we thought it was trauma to her back, her spine, etc. It was a severe neurological issue that prevented her from being able to get up. She was found screaming on the side of the tracks. So the forest department was able to move her to a place, and then they informed us that she was not progressing despite them harnessing her, giving her a lot of help, etc. And so they requested us to come in and assist them, and our team went there immediately with laser therapy and all the tools we had, and we found that she was completely down and there was no movement at all, and it looked very bleak, and we didn't think she would even survive. So at that point of time, we requested the forest department if they would permit us to move her to the elephant hospital, and the chief wildlife warden, God bless him, he was very kind, and he instantly took the decision and sent us the permission letter. We were able to then transport Bani in a specialized ambulance. It had to be a very special journey because we had to cushion the floor of the ambulance with lots of hay and straw and soft bedding, and then we had her in it. We had to keep feeding her to keep her comforted during that journey. And once she came, then we had this huge challenge in front of us. The challenge here was to restore some ability for her to even behave normally. She was not even able to get up. And in fact, many of our supporters were even questioning if we were doing the right thing by even letting her live. They wanted us to euthanize her at that point. And so we said, well, even before we head down that path, let's rule out every possibility that she can get back on her feet. So we got neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons, every kind of specialists of muscles, nervine disorders, etc. We just had to ensure that we did not leave any stone unturned. So we got an Ayurvedic expert from Kerala who spent 2 months and I think about 70 liters of specialized herbal medicated oil on this little girl, giving her massages. We suspended her in our hydrotherapy pool to give her the ability to float and take weight off her feet. She was getting bed sores on her side, so we had to keep turning her, flipping her over. And then the neurological surgeon that we spoke with said, maybe you should try acupuncture. That might be an option that you could try. And we found an acupuncture specialist in Thailand, invited her to come over. She came down. We arranged for her to come and train our team of veterinary doctors. And all of us got needles in our hands to understand how it was going to work. And then we did that 7 months later, combining laser therapy, hydrotherapy, acupuncture, Ayurveda treatment, and love, compassion, and pampering. She finally, what started off was her tail started twitching.
Goodness.
The tail is moving, so the connection was there. And we had to keep doing a lot of physiotherapy as well to make sure joints didn't freeze up. That was the first thing we were worried about, that if the ankle joints and the knee joints started freezing up, then when she could move, if at all she could, then those joints wouldn't cooperate. So that was another thing that we had to do. But 7 months later, she was finally able to actually start moving. Cushions to support her, got her in the pool. But yeah, that journey took us 7 long months. Now the challenge is for us to give her, the ability to have social interaction with adult elephants. And there the problem is that she's still unsteady on her hind legs, not completely steady. She still has to drag her right hind leg a little bit. So we have to put a shoe on it, because from the accident and the overuse of her right sole, the soles of her hind feet are both very fragile, and they've thinned down. So we've got to be very careful. We have to put shoes on our feet. So keeping all that in mind, the way we plan this interaction and introduction for her has to be very carefully monitored. So that is going to be our a big challenge, and I think she will have a challenge because she's got a long future with us. She probably live 60 or 70 years,
Yeah.
and so we have to prepare for that well, and that I think is one of our big challenges.
I almost want to end on that very hopeful note, but I do have this lingering question. So much of what you say is an invitation to live like an elephant, to me, to be one. What lessons would you say to all the people listening to this, down the road? What lessons can we reap from the journeys of these elephants who've gone from there to here, and what are your takeaways that we can participate in?
I think one of the lessons that I take away from the journeys of these elephants and being so close to them and watching them and observing them and feeling what they feel, I think it's important to understand, yes, there might be hundreds and thousands of people who abuse these animals, but you can make a difference. So I would strongly encourage people to come to Wildlife SOS, come and volunteer with us, come and visit these elephants, meet them. Seeing them, I think, has changed the lives of so many, such as yourself, right? And the way you describe your experience with Chanchal and watching the other elephants here, I think that is so important. So I would encourage maybe everybody in Brown University to come down, maybe with you or without you. We must definitely have.
This has been a very moving, informative conversation, and I feel it's the beginning of a long series of conversations. Because I want to thank both of you for being so candid, for telling us so much we needed to hear. Thank you for the time. Thank you very much for sharing these stories, and I'll take up your invitation that we not just me, but everyone at Brown and everyone at the AAR come to Wildlife SOS. Thank you very much. Your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leela. We would love to collaborate with you and your institution and maybe create some kind of a program in the future and maybe do a regular podcast about this, because you have incredible questions and we love the interaction, and we look forward to doing this more often with you. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. I have to say I needed to use this again. Thank you, everyone who made this film. Before we open it up for Q&A, I want to thank the entire Wildlife SOS team for their collective effort in making this film. I want to name some people. Suvidha Bhatnagar, who's the Director of Communications at Wildlife SOS. Rishabh Mehta, Communications Manager. Suryoday Singh Man, Manager, Filmmaking and Audiovisual Production. And I'm sure just at the AAR, there are lots of people behind the scenes who make anything and everything possible. I want to say thank you to every one of them, including the staff at the AAR, for all their behind the scenes work in making this whole effort possible. Yeah, I will open it up to questions now. It's so great to see you again. This time I was very struck by one thing that you said. And I have a practical question attached to that, which might help our audiences also. I was very moved by the distinction you made between survival and happiness. Like two different things that you really, everything, all your efforts are first you work towards the survival of an elephant, whatever it takes to make that happen. And then you really work towards, and it takes love to make the happiness part work out, that you really work towards that. So the practical questions I have attached to that, I'm thinking, of course, freedom is clearly a two-way thing. We have encroached so much on habitat, on wild, on wilderness and forest areas, that we now have an absolute responsibility to ensure the freedom of another species, right? So toward that responsibility and the fact that, the goal is happiness of all species, what would you advise, ordinary people like us who don't have, who are well intentioned but don't have the know-how, and we unwittingly engage in exploitative practices, as tourists, how can you help us not do that? What would you tell us to not do? How do we see the difference between, ethical sanctuaries and harmful ones?
Should I go ahead like that, Leela?
Sure.
Okay. So, well, firstly, I'd like to thank you, Amy, Claudia, and the whole team at Brown and AAR for hosting this. I think it's a very important topic and undervalued hugely. I think more people need to see this, understand this, because this is a critical core subject that is not recognized as widely as it deserves to be. Now, going to your question, Leela, about the difference between survival and happiness, but also how the average person on the street can understand what is an ethical sanctuary and how to differentiate between a place where there are elephants that calls itself a sanctuary and a true sanctuary in the true sense. So, for that, every person needs to empower themselves with the knowledge of how to identify the difference. I mean, surely we know how to, when there is a genuine iPhone or a MacBook that we buy and a fake one, which has a sticker on it, but doesn't have all the other details. So, similar to that, Wildlife SOS has created a website just for this purpose. It's called refusetoride.org. It's called refusetoride.org. I'll just repeat it one more time so people understand. It's www.refusetoride.org. And it actually goes into a lot of detail about how people can understand what these elephants go through. An elephant that is subjected to being available for tourism, to be ridden on safaris, or for domestic purposes such as street begging or weddings or even tourist rides like in the Amer Fort in Jaipur. All of these animals are trained using that technique, which is called Khatiyarikal or Bhajan, where these animals are subjected to a great deal of trauma, abuse, like we've already discussed, and you've seen those videos already. And that refusetoride.org website will let people understand the need to stay away from such things. And we now have scientific evidence to prove that riding on elephant back can actually cause fragmentation of their vertebral column. And we have X-rays, we have radiology images that confirm this greatly, and it impacts the entire body conformation of the elephant. So I would say step one is, do that, visit the website, learn more about Wildlife SOS, come and see an ethical sanctuary. When you come and see an ethical sanctuary where elephants are not allowed to, get in a pool with people, etc., and people are not jumping on top of them and stuff like that, that is where the line, you have to draw the line about keeping the elephants at a point where, yeah, there might be certainly a little bit of distance between the people and the animals, but that's what the elephants need sometimes. And any place that offers rides, painting elephants, or walking with elephants at very close proximity, where the mahout is using a bullhook or is controlling the elephants with a sharp instrument to keep the tourists safe, that clearly is not a place that is ethical. Do you know the number of people that die from sitting on elephant back? It's all hidden. All this information is concealed. Unfortunately, Jaipur alone, where people ride elephants and go up and down the fort, I think we've had maybe over 10 foreign tourists die just in the last decade. And every year, without fail, at least 8 to 10 people are killed by their own elephants in Kerala. And of course, innocent bystanders are added to that toll. So it's really important. The question you ask is very important. Geeta, please add if I've missed anything.
Riding elephants is so common throughout Asia that a lot of people actually ask us, can it really matter much to an animal that is so huge if it carries a few additional kilos on its back? I think they fail to see it's not the ride itself, but it is what goes into making an elephant rideable that is the horror story. The poaching of the calf from the forest, the training that follows, Karthik just lightly mentioned it, the beatings, the trauma, the chaining, because it's only the tools of fear which control the animal and make it lose its wildness, so to say. And therefore, it's almost a decade of pain and agony that that animal goes from the moment it has been separated from its herd in the wild. All this for what? I think any intelligent, ethical person will ask himself, will I put any living creature through 10 years of pain and agony, separation from its herd, and miseries of every kind just to ride on its back? I mean, the senselessness of that activity, I think, should hit any thinking person. So it's not a question of you don't weigh much, how does it make a difference to an elephant? It's why are you taking a magnificent mammal out of the wilderness, out of its jungle, and doing this to it? For what entertainment or joy? I think that's the ethical question we all have to ask ourselves.
And as you say, it's sort of unthinkingly done, but when you even a few minutes of thought uh, can make a tremendous difference to these elephants. I want to encourage our audience to post their questions in chat, and either Claudia or Amy will broadcast those questions. So please feel free to do that at any time in this conversation. Yeah. I think the other question that I wanted to ask you when we were having our the interviewed, the filmed conversation was, and I forgot, these are huge expeditions to go rescue an elephant, rehabilitate. It must cost a fortune. It must cost a fortune. I'm curious to know what does that involve, and how do you raise this money?
Well, Leela, you hit a nerve, definitely. So, with that question, yeah, and this is a question we often get asked about how we do this and identify an elephant, rescue it, bring it to our facility, build an enclosure for it with a pond, a protected contact wall, and start the rehab process. So, in the region of about $200,000 is what it costs us for one elephant, and then there's the annual cost of about twelve to $15,000 to keep it going for the food, medicines, care, etc. And it's also a very labor intensive technique, to manage these elephants because they've come from such broken places. So we've got to ensure that they have somebody to watch over them. We monitor their sleep. We make sure they have beds every day. We have a machine. It's a earth moving piece of machinery called a bobcat, and we have another one called a JCB, a skid steer. So these two machines create beds for every single elephant in every single enclosure at our facilities. So to do that, do that kind of bedroom service and housekeeping service is like running a 40-bedroom hotel for 40 elephants. So yeah, it can be time consuming and infrastructure heavy. So sometimes I feel like we run a construction company, and because elephants are breaking things easily and there's a lot of maintenance going on. So on the lighter side of things, yeah, that's how it feels. But yeah, the costs involved are not small. They're jumbo size, just like the animals we rescue.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
can
to
imagine.
answer your other question of how we raise it,
Wow.
it's primarily from individuals. A lot of we do get grants from institutions. We have partnerships with several institutions, zoos, colleges, universities, etc. But we also have granting institutions that support us. But a large part of our contributions come from individuals, who sponsor these elephants. I mean, they might be giving just $50 or $100 a month, but the bulk of it comes from those kind of people. But we also have people who will make single gifts of anywhere from 50,000 to $100,000, a month or one time each year. So
Yeah.
that is how we raise the money. 100% of all funds we raise is through contributions and donation support. So
Yes.
yes, fundraising is unfortunately, whether we like it or not, is an important part of how much we can help these animals, and it is that support that we get which makes it possible for us to continue this work month after month and to know that we have that regular monthly support. We'd rather have somebody give us $50 a month rather than $500 at one go, because then we know that we have that monthly support to count on,
Right.
and we can always be there for the next elephants that need us.
Yeah, thank you. It's all the small strides, the small steps that add up to a stride. I know the questions are growing.
Leela?
So, yeah, so
I don't know if you can see them. I will otherwise read them for you.
go ahead and do that if you don't mind, Claudia.
Kath is asking, this is a question in the Q&A. Can you say more about how elephants experience indignity and how they manifest that pain? Conversely, how do they manifest the regaining of dignity?
When you say, how does an elephant manifest the pain? Like almost any other species, if you are around when they're getting beaten and brutalized, and we've had the unfortunate experience of seeing this happen when we were doing our initial study on captive elephants, and we went through several states which have a huge captive elephant population. And it is heartbreaking to see the screaming and the crying of the calves, of the even the adults in the kraal, where they are kept in very small spaces, and where regularly, as a matter of routine, every day, 5 or 6 people will beat it to teach it to be in awe of them and in fear of them. So, unlike any other species, they show their pain and fear through their body language, through their screams, to the shouting. And how do they manifest the recovery? Once again, communicating through body language again. For example, once we get them, and once we've removed the chains, and once we remove the shackles, we see the sense of relief that the animal feels, and that the animal slowly feels itself free to walk around, to enjoy the pool or the mud bath. You can visibly feel the animal relaxing. You can feel the animal not tensing up. Initially, when we get them, they wince and they flinch at any movement around them, whether it be of a stick or just a sugarcane which is being brought to feed them. It's all body language and body signs which are very easy to read. And you notice them that first of all they start trusting. When they see the mahout, when they see the doctor, the vet come in, or when they see the handlers and caretakers come in, they stop wincing. They stop getting on the defensive. Elephants show their if they are bulls, they can show their temper. If they are females, they show their fear. And it's all done by just the body language, and one has to be very alert around them to see exactly how to behave around them with very calm, measured movements and nothing sudden. If you notice that an elephant is particularly scared of maybe sticks, or particularly scared of a vehicle or the sounds of a truck, very often initially, where we never used to allow vehicles to come anywhere near where we had our newly rescued elephants, because the sound used to upset them too much. Loud music, people shouting, people fighting. Animals react a lot when they sense anger and violence in human tones. So, studying all this and keeping lookout when we see our elephants flinch, and that's how we can guess that they are still needing more repair, more healing, more silence, more quiet, more peace to do their own thing. And I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's all through studying their body language and their behavior and their reactions to the environment that you know that they are now progressing, and they have learned to trust their environment as well as the people around them.
We've got a lot of questions, Karthik and Geeta. So here's another one. There are many. We have, Roxana asks, how do environmental changes impact your work?
You mean like climate change?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two aspects to this question. Captive elephants don't get a chance to live in the environment they're actually born in. Most of them, begging elephants, may never see a forest. They learn to move on tarred roads and live on concrete and cemented blocks. So, to that extent, elephants really are deprived heavily of anything natural in their environment. That's one kind of an answer. And therefore, when we get them to our rescue center, we do try to give them uh, as much of greenery and soft soil to walk on as possible. Um, Other environmental changes, if you mean like climate change, etc., well, the elephants in the wild certainly are feeling it. Some of our projects are with wild elephants and the human intrusion into their habitat through mining and other such activities which disturb them. Elephants have memory for their own corridors for food and water. And these corridors are embedded in their collective memory for hundreds of years. So they tend to use the same route to go to water bodies or to go to food sources, seasonal food sources. And human activity interferes with this, whether it's highways, railroads, power lines, villages setting up and doing crop growing suddenly in the middle of their corridor. But mainly it's mining and these kind of activities that disturb them in a bigger way. Then the elephants have to adjust. And in fact, our project in Chhattisgarh that was mentioned in the film is based on this large scale disturbance of the environment around the elephant in one state, so that they moved to another state which had no elephants originally, wasn't an elephant state originally. So, yes, when you say environment, it's usually all the human activities in the environment which have disturbed them, created fragmented landscapes, destroyed their corridors, natural corridors. Very often, water bodies are gone, food sources are gone. The elephants are struggling. We have about 20% of the population of wild elephant that we had maybe 5 decades ago. So there has been a severe decimation even in the wild. And the wild elephant faces as many challenges as the captive elephant. Did that answer the question? I'm not too sure.
Does. So I have, here's a question. Most of the audience here are people who study religion in all its variety, defined in a million different ways. So Laurel Schneider's question is, do you see, are there challenges or opportunities for scholars of religion or people who study in terms of religion or, for better supporting these animals? I mean, I'm thinking of the many ways in which, the elephant is revered in India, and yet you also see this. So could you sort of address that question in any way you want?
Okay, so religion is a double-edged sword in this particular context. The elephant has been not just an iconic figure in our art, in our architecture, but also in our religious texts. And we do have Lord Ganesha, who's the elephant-headed god, the god of wisdom, of auspicious beginnings. And I think the elephant in the wild has suffered a great deal because of this association. We keep elephants, a lot of elephants, especially in South India, live in temples, and people go to them for blessings. So a child starting school will go to the temple elephant and feed it something and get blessed by the elephant. I truly don't know what to say at this point, because I feel the elephant goes through so much of torture and agony, um, being the representative of Lord Ganesha, so to say. And it's used in all religious processions in a state like Kerala. No puja is believed to be complete unless there's the presence of an elephant there. Many people believe that the soil on which the elephant stands is sacred, and they come and ask for some of the soil and from under the feet of the elephants. there's a very fine line between faith and superstition. And just as there's a very fine line between tradition that is being followed because it's cultural and tradition that is being followed because it's religious. And I personally believe that any tradition that perpetrates cruelty on another species um, should perhaps be changed. It need not be followed blindly. Um, I think, Leela, we can't go into the philosophy and the rituals and too much of it at this time. But suffice it to say, yes, there is a religious reason for having the elephant in the temple, but I'm not too sure that
Yeah.
it's been good for the elephant.
I'd like to add one more point to what Geeta just said.
Mm.
You know, religion, while sometimes can give people a veil to perpetrate certain kinds of abuse, etc., but it's also an opportunity to try and try and de-link that. So I mean, it might be a great project for some of your scholars in the religious studies to try and work and reverse engineer this whole thing, because while Ganesha, who is the god of all good beginnings in India, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of Ganesha temples, the elephant god temples. Everybody who goes to apply for an exam or apply for a visa or for a new job, they go to the temple, visit the temple, do a prayer, and then go. But why then is the real incarnation, the physical form of Ganesha, which is the elephant, like the elephant god, while all the rituals are centered around that, why is an animal subjected to so much trauma? And there is clearly um, a desensitization that happens. And I've also seen that, from a very young age, children in India are desensitized to seeing elephants. So when you ask them to draw a picture of an elephant, they draw a picture of an elephant with somebody on top with chains on its leg.
Mm.
So they assume that that's how an elephant is. It's like it's like a part of the formula. So
Yeah.
we might have the opportunity to somehow try and understand how that religious connection is, that link is somehow getting fragmented at that point.
Yeah.
When they go from devotees of the elephant god, how come the devotees of the elephant god, who will do anything, who will spend millions of dollars in pouring milk and worshipping the same god on a stone statue, will treat the living reincarnation of that same statue
Yeah.
in such horrific ways?
Yeah.
Just a thought, for thought and discussion later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think in some ways you address the question that Janice Poss has about, about educating. And so how much of this has to do with re-educating ourselves about, images and how we've taught ourselves to think about another species. Yeah. Here's a question about from Julia Watts Belser about, and she says, I'm very interested in the question of non-speaking communication, about the other ways that something passes between a person and a particular animal. Geeta said at one point in the video, it's not speech. And the question for me is disappearing. So let me try and get it again. It's not speech.
It's not speech, but something else. Could you say more about the process of coming to learn one another's ways of communicating, and what shifts that requires in the human person to become more attentive to these nuances?
I think a very important thing is that a child growing up should have a pet, whether it's a dog or a cat or a rabbit or any animal, because I think children, when they are very young, they understand communication without speech pretty well. And I think, like, for example, my growing up years, I was best friends with our German Shepherd, our family German Shepherd, and my mom knew wherever I was when I was 2 and 3, just because the dog was always there with me, she could see the tail. I really do. I've never been without an animal around me or at home, anywhere. I'm always with animals as pets or as rescues or whatever. And so I have taken it as a given that most people can sense. I mean, very often you'll notice that you look at your pet, you look at, let's just take the example of a dog. You look at your pet dog and you just, you just use your eyes or just a finger to make a gesture, and he knows that he's supposed to come up and put his head on your lap, and he does it. And or when you just make an indication with your head, he knows he's not supposed to come and beg for the food. You don't have to actually tell him anything. And I don't think I consciously worked at it, but I was able to do this when I was very young with almost all the animals, and we had always had large number of dogs, cats, rescued birds, squirrels, everything at home. So I think it's just a question. You can communicate with the species if you're observant, if you watch their body language, and if you allow them to tune in to your own body language too. That's also important if it's going to be a two-way conversation. And it's the same way as Karthik can communicate much more with reptiles, or he seems to sense. So I think it is um, at a different level of mental communication. I can't call it. I don't need to call it intuitive. I'm sure others may have read books and literature about it. I am only speaking from my own personal experience. Karthik, would you like to add something?
Yeah. I'd like to add, to specifically answer the question of Julia Watts Belser, about the process of learning each other's ways of communication, what shift that requires in the human person to become more attentive to these nuances. And to that, I would like to draw from what Geeta mentioned about, people have an opportunity to be kinder, to be more intuitive, to be more sensitive, and that very often is becomes so much more clear when they have the opportunity to have a pet at home. That's what Geeta was trying to say. It sensitizes us to creatures other than other human beings. And when someone is exposed to that, then they become much more intuitive to notice the changes of behavior, the non spoken words from an animal, especially. And you can easily sense that. You can stand in front of an animal very often and notice what's going on, whether the animal is doing some stereotypic behavior. Is it struggling to get water, or is it trying to get out of that enclosure? Is it happy? Is it content? Is it uncomfortable? Is it, under duress? There are elephants that you can go to in Kerala that are in temples, for example, who will pick up branches from trees and fling them like missiles at any unsuspecting person, mostly tourists that are walking around. So things like that. I mean, that elephant is clearly under distress, and you can see many animals like that. So I hope that the shift that is required is for people to be more tolerant, to become less intolerant, to be more accepting of other species. That they deserve a space to. They came to this planet before us, but we don't give them an opportunity. And in fact, one of our recent ventures, and I think all of you will be very happy to know, whole effort on elephant friendly tea and elephant friendly coffee that we're trying to do through our new project in the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve, where we are trying to conserve the wild habitats of these elephants, protect their corridors, while also working with the local communities and encouraging tea and coffee estate owners to be tolerant of the presence of elephants in their estates instead of driving them out and throwing petrol bombs on them and electrocuting them and things like that. We are promoting that, and that's something that's new, and we hope that that might be a way of not just educating people, but also creating awareness and creating an incentivization for people to be more accepting and tolerant of elephants and coexist and supporting and encouraging that coexistence.
Mm, mm, that's very helpful. Um, Mara Benjamin asks, do you see elephants who've been relatively more rehabilitated offering their own spontaneous interventions or rehabilitating efforts to elephants who are in need? Example, Bani. When do you reintroduce an injured or elephant abuse to others? In other words, when do you get out of the way rather than doing things for them?
Well, this is a very tricky situation and requires a lot of delicate maneuver because, like I explained, and Geeta's also been saying, that many of our elephants come in very, very fragile conditions. They're broken, they're um, critically injured, and they're kind of getting a semblance of a little bit of normalcy after spending a long time with us. So if we have someone like Skinny Lakshmi, we call her Skinny Lakshmi because she was so unlucky. Every attempt of trying to rescue her was delayed, and we had to go through multiple hoops and all kinds of problems. But finally, we rescued her. But she's so fragile that if another elephant that we introduced her to would even playfully nudge her, she could fall over and break her hip. That would be certain death for her. That would be fatal. So sometimes, I mean, these reintroductions and introductions within the herd, you can see this photo behind me where there are five elephants in one pool. That's one herd. All of them, we were able to do that introduction successfully, and they all are inseparable in many cases, and they stay together. But so we try and do it as organically as possible. But in some cases, like Bani, we'll have to engineer it very carefully. But Bani also has certain disease risks, so we've got to be extremely careful, and we cannot do this lightly. In fact, we are currently in discussion with some experts who might have to come down and maybe guide us through this process. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Going back to an earlier answer that you gave, and I think it's tied to that, though it's a little more specific. Brian Pennington asked, can you explain Indian law in whatever, succinct way you can in this forum that governs elephant capture, captivity, and transfer?
Okay, I'll try and make it as brief. This is a very long. I can answer this. This question alone will take 2 hours to answer. So I think we might run out of time. But the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 was a very progressive law that does not permit capture of any animals. Wild elephants can only be captured under the orders of the Chief Wildlife Warden of the state or from the government of India only if such elephants are problematic, they are causing major destruction, or are killing people. So only in that case is an elephant captured. But there's always illegal capturing that happens sometimes. There's illegal trafficking, and even transfer of elephants happens only with the permission of the Chief Wildlife Warden, the Government of India, and the Central Zoo Authority. So it's very complex laws in place. But like drugs and narcotics, illegal wildlife trafficking is second next to human trafficking and narcotics and gun running. It's like a $29 billion industry, if I'm not mistaken. And so that is something that we all have to combat constantly, and that does happen. So, and for we in fact, Wildlife SOS works closely with a lot of enforcement agencies to try and combat that. We have an anti-poaching division. We have informers in the field. We have investigators who help us gather intelligence and work through that. So we are constantly working with the law enforcement, and we have our own lawyers. We have about 70 cases in court that we've kind of worked through, and about maybe 30 or 35 live cases that are still ongoing where elephants are embroiled in these cases. I hope that answers the question. But any of your of the scholars who are asking questions can feel free to send us an email if they want a more detailed response. We'll be more than happy to send a detailed response at as early as possible.
Thank you, Karthik. Claudia, can I request you to feel, to ask some of these questions because my screen is flickering. And
Okay. There is another question from Ruth and Benny Musonda. Thank you both so much for your amazing work. It is truly incredible. I'm curious to hear if you've collaborated with any similar organizations in Africa, for example, info sharing, mutual programming, etc. I recently visited an elephant orphanage in Lusaka, Zambia, and there's a link to that particular place as well. So the question is about collaborating with other continents.
We would love to collaborate with more organizations, but because of the bandwidth that we have to kind of work with, we've not had a chance to collaborate with that particular organization in Africa. But we'd love to be introduced to them, and we'd be happy to do that. We do have active collaborations with several American institutions, including the Tennessee Elephant Sanctuary, which is near Nashville. And in fact, we're sending some of our staff there in a couple of months for some staff exchange programs as well. And we also have a lot of elephant and bear keepers that come from the US and Canada to India. And we do a lot of staff exchange and transfer of knowledge and exchange of knowledge and stuff like that. I hope that answers the question. But yeah, we'd love an introduction. We are open to collaborating with everyone, anywhere. And there also another question from Roxana about why did we choose to work with elephants when so many other animals are abused? Yes, Roxana, I would like to say that we'd like to help all the animals. But that's humanly perhaps not possible. I mean, if we had $5 trillion, we'd do it. I can assure you that. With Geeta's leadership, there's, her motto is save them all. That's a motto. So we would have done that, but we started with $200 in a garage 30 years ago, trying to help bears. And so now we run facilities across India for sloth bears, black bears, brown bears, elephants, tigers, leopards, crocodiles, snakes, birds, and everything else in between all of this. So unfortunately, we have been deeply infected with this disease of not knowing how to say no to an animal in distress. We do our best, but sadly, financial resources, those greenbacks, as you call them in your country, those are what are the obstacle and the challenge for us to save all the abused animals. But yeah, elephants are the most sentient animal, I would say, given the size of their brain. They're the largest living mammal on earth in terms of land mammal. And it is a real shame that humans, being as intelligent as we are and as destructive as we are, we choose to destroy these animals. And it is for that reason that we realize that, this in our lifetimes, if Geeta and I and the whole team at Wildlife SOS in our lifetimes can bring an end to this abuse and change the history for this species, I'd be happy to go to my grave smiling.
Yeah. Is there a question, Claudia, or can I jump in?
No, I think it's time for you to do final remarks. Go ahead.
I did have a question that would perhaps lead into find some final observations, and that is, a question that draws perhaps more on Geeta's everyday experience of, working with in Delhi at rescue centers and shelters. And what would you say to those of us who don't really work with elephants and bears on an everyday basis, but we have lots of opportunities. There's other species around us all the time. What would you say we need to cultivate, or how to be aware and how to be engaged in ensuring the respect and dignity and freedom of all species? Save them all, as you say.
That's a big question, actually.
Break it down. Yeah.
I think what one requires is a kind of a mindfulness, mindful awareness of any living creature around you. It could just simply be in your front garden. And I know so many people who communicate with the birds and the squirrels and small animals that appear in there. backyards or in their front gardens, or even with pets, I think there is a kind of a stillness you can develop, a kind of a silence in which you can then communicate a lot better with the animals. And I think that goes for us, whether we're dealing with wildlife or we're dealing with our pets or we're dealing with farm animals. In particularly, I find that the way the modern age goes, we've lost our sensitivity to farm animals almost completely. We don't see them with the same eyes that we see our cat and dog at home. We fail to realize that the cow or the horse or the donkey has the same degree of sensitivity, um, can feel the same amount of pain, senses rejection, hostility, violence. Almost all animals are very sensitive and can sense all these emotions in people. I think it's us who don't observe their reactions to us. It's us who don't, like I said, create that mindfulness in your dealings with animals. And you can do it with farm animals and companion animals as much as with wildlife.
Yeah. As we start to wrap up, and this conversation can really go on, as Karthik said, for hours on each one of these wonderful questions that our audience had and the amazing responses you had for all of us. But I loved how you've kind of taken us from thinking about the big issues, to the minutiae, which brings us, which makes me think that, concepts like freedom and dignity really come down to the everyday. The observation, as you said, the empathy, the sensitivity, uh, and while we witness big things happening around us like genocides and terrorism and what have you, it's still within our purview to mold the clay that's in our hand. And I really appreciate the many ways in which you've drawn us back to the little things. And I'm going to be thinking a lot about the distinction you make between the threshold for survival, and then the transition to happiness from there. And that is the goal that all of us share, uh, all species. And I want to conclude this session by thanking everyone who attended this session. Thank you to everyone at Wildlife SOS, and to you, Geeta and Karthik, you for such an extraordinary session. And not just a session, but for the absolutely extraordinary work you do without seeking anything for yourselves. I thank you very much for all the humility that you have put into this. Thank you. And yes, I do want to invite everyone who's listening and will listen, because this is going to be recorded and broadcast elsewhere, to please go to Wildlife SOS and volunteer and sign up for their incredible founders trip. Is that what it's called? Founders trip.
And send money, send money.
I'll send money. Of course, I'm going to make a big plug for that one. If everything counts, so please, every bit of your help will help another elephant out there. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes if there are some things you want to say as we end the session. Turn it back to you, Karthik and Geeta.
Well, I'd like to just thank all of you for making this so interesting. We love the questions, and it's really interesting that there would be so many people who are so concerned, and it's that kindness from all of you that shows that you can all dig deep inside your heart and pull those strings. And it's really important that we see this all as one team. And I think it takes one person, one thought, and a small gesture to start making a difference. That's how we all started. And our journeys have been this way, and we'd love to come and maybe at some point of time, Geeta and I can come and do a talk on our work. We lecture around the world about the work of our organizations and how we are able to make a difference. And we'd love to come and meet your scholars, your students, your faculty, and we'd love to invite all of you to come down and maybe do some practical sessions on our facilities. And our Elephant Conservation and Care Center and the Elephant Hospital campus, we call that the field of dreams. And that's what it is for the animals here. So we'd love to host you all. So please plan something, and we look forward to keeping in touch with everybody. So if you need to reach out to us, you have our email address, and it's just karthik@wildlifesos.org. You have our website. You can just reach out to us. And if anybody, we do one unique, very beautiful trip once a year where people really want to come and enjoy India from the lens of Geeta and myself. And Geeta and I lead this trip with our colleague and friend Kip Peterson, who's also here with us today. And we organize this really unique 10-day tour, and it's available on our website. You can look at it. People can look at it, and it gives them a window into religion, culture, but also the connection with the animals. And they get to see the Friendico Sanctuary, where they meet all our rescued dogs, cats. We have 5,000 animals in our care over there: dogs, cats, camels, sheep, goats, donkeys, horses, etc. And then the journey goes into Delhi, the meeting all the street dogs, etc. But also then moving on to Agra, meeting our elephants, interacting with the veterinary doctors, understanding the caregivers, the bears. And then we go to Ranthambore and do a lovely safari where we see wild tigers in their pristine habitats. And yeah, we'd love to invite anyone who is interested to come and join us. So thank you.
5,000.
Thank you so much.
5,000 animals. That'll get me to stop bragging about my 4 dogs.
We have
Geeta,
24 just at the office.
okay.
24 dogs and 68 cats, if you'd like.
Wow. Okay. Geeta?
Thank you so much. It's been a long session. Thank you everyone for their patience, hearing us out. And I'd just like to add to Karthik's invite, please come and visit and volunteer and share the experience of being with the animals. There's nothing more fun and nothing more exciting than that. So please, everybody's welcome. Please do come sometime.
Thank you very much. I know it's past dinner and, probably closer to bedtime for you guys. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.